In this episode, Golden and I discuss the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Full speed ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power. The Omega Beam.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 123. I'm your host, Oren Merton. And as you probably know, the latest Marvel superhero TV series just completed on Disney+. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is 6 episodes long, each 1-hour episodes. Now that the series is completed, that means it's time to talk about it. Like we've done with other shows, we are going to start spoiler-free and then give you a lot of warning before we go into spoilers. So with that said, let's go! I am here with Golden to talk about The Falcon and the Winter Soldier streaming on Disney+. So we'll do the spoiler-free upfront part, and then we'll get spoilerific later. So what did you think?
It was a 6-hour movie.
It was.
But unlike movies, they're able to really go deep into the characters and the story and the issues. Not that movies don't go into the issues, but
they had a lot more time.
They had a lot of time because they had 6 hours to do it. Roughly 6 hours, I'm estimating.
Yeah, it was about 6 hours. I think I would agree with everything, and I think that Marvel has gotten really good at infusing what are, at their heart, adventure stories with some real themes and some real issues that resonate in today's society and aren't just cool special effects, cool stunts, but really try to tell us something about the world at large, how people should interact maybe with each other, how they do interact with each other. They create colorful, three-dimensional characters, and there's a real story here, while at the same time providing lots of change of countries and scenery and stunts and effects and all the stuff you expect from a Marvel joint where there's lots of characters in costume.
And it really starts with a bang, and it ends with a powerful bang of another sort at the end.
It does, and it manages to maintain the level of tension even when it's not lots of action on the scene at the time. It, like you said, it's a 6-hour movie, but for each of those 6 episodes, I don't think there was a point I felt it was slow.
Yeah, no, I can't say that there was a point that I really feel was slow. In fact, the last episode, I felt like they stuck in an entire movie in that last episode.
Yeah, they packed it full. They did. Absolutely. And of course, Sam Wilson, played by Anthony Mackie, Bucky Barnes, played by Sebastian Stan. These actors are fantastic, and they absolutely inhabit their characters. And it wasn't just them. Everyone they brought in, they had Daniel Bruhl as Baron Zemo, and the whole thing, all the cast, the writing, the effects, everything was really top-notch. The direction, everything was really high quality. You really can't fault any of the production. It was really something to behold, and I could not recommend it more highly.
Even Baron Zemo's character. Everything is detailed. Small little details in the first episode may come back.
Yep, everything gets paid off.
Those small little details, everything pays off. There's no such thing as Chekhov's gun because everything
is Chekhov's
everything
gun.
Is important.
Yeah, it's incredibly well structured, and that is to the credit of the writing. Yeah, I think it's safe to say at this point that if you are a fan of this genre, you pretty much should just consider your Disney Plus subscription as just part of the price of being a fan, because between the Star Wars content, the Marvel content, all the other just Disney content that exists on Disney Plus, I think it's quickly becoming just a must-have for genre because there's so much quality on the streaming network, and the Falcon and Winter Soldier absolutely plays into that in just a great way.
And it is very well written.
Yeah.
Especially the last episode.
Yes, they're all great, but the last episode really felt like the writers felt this was their opportunity to not just wrap up the story in a satisfying way, but to really say something about the human condition and about what we can strive for as a society. And they went for it in a big way.
I mean, the overall premise is that basically there is this group of people that wants to go back to one world, one people. When the blip happened, or the snap, or whatever you want to call it, when it happened and half the people disappeared, the world came together. It didn't matter where you were from or who you were. You were part of this one world. And they feel like, not that they didn't want people to come back, but that when that happened, all of those dividers went back up.
Right.
All those prejudices came back. They saw the benefit of everyone acting as one world.
And there are also a lot of refugees because as they touched on it in a humorous way in Spider-Man Far From Home, where they mentioned that people showed up in other people's homes and things like that because, over 5 years, houses get sold, etc. And then somebody...
not even necessarily sold. They just probably got occupied.
Right. And then people end up back where they had been left, and suddenly there's other people there. But this one takes it more seriously, that there's a lot of people who were displaced by all of this. And that is a complex issue. It's not as simple as let's just let everything stand the way it was, or let's go back to before the blip. This is a complicated issue. Not all the power brokers necessarily are trying to find the best solutions for everyone.
I don't think you can use power brokers in that way for this series, because there is actually a character called the power broker.
There is a character called the power broker.
So, but the people in charge are trying to make these decisions, and they're basically saying, send everyone back home. And that's not a message that people feel is the correct message, or the correct way to deal with it.
Right. And this creates a lot of tension, and in that tension, of course, our heroes, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, find themselves embroiled, and adventure ensues for 6 excellent episodes. So yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, do yourself a favor and watch it. It's really good, and I would even go so far as to say, even if you're not a superhero genre fan, this is just good fiction. This is just good. I mean, the story does not rely on superpowers. The superpowers that some characters have are really just sort of flavor. So even if you're not generally a superhero person, if you like more sort of political intrigue and things like that, spy, adventure, thriller, I think this covers those bases as well.
And I think it gives you enough of an introduction to the characters that you can know who they are without having to watch everything. Although I did find it humorous that Marvel put out a what to watch before the season finale and listed almost every single movie that both of the characters
Sure.
are in. Although, like I said, I was disappointed that Ant-Man wasn't in there.
Yeah. Falcon does show up there.
And then watch all 5 of these episodes again before the season finale.
Sure. Well, as much as they were just trying to say watch all of Marvel's stuff because, they're proud of it, if you have a Disney Plus subscription, it's all there for you. So it is possible for you to do that without having to rent a ton of extra material. It's all part of your subscription. So you don't need to watch any of it, but it is all there. So you can if you want to. Well, I think we're kind of ready to wave goodbye to the spoiler-free section and start getting into more details. What do you think?
Sounds good.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Spoiler. Boy, this series sure started with a bang. Like you said, that helicopter / Falcon duel that opens up the series, boy, it is amazing. I mean, it is as good as any sequence you will find in a feature film.
So there's a helicopter duel at the beginning.
Right?
There's a helicopter duel at the end.
There is. And this is just
But a little bit different.
A little bit different. This is sort of insider baseball for those who understand about budgets. So normally the way they budget a television show is each episode has a certain amount of money they can spend on it. But that's not how Marvel does the series. They give the entire series a blanket sum of money, and they can distribute it however they want. This has been done by a few shows. Game of Thrones did this, etc. So in that first episode, it really felt like Marvel spent all the monies to make that happen. And so in the end, when they had the second one, you'll notice it was at night, because it's always easier to do CG at night because it doesn't need to be as detailed. They don't have to spend as much money. So part of me couldn't help but think, yeah, they really made that opening just amazing. If you like action, if you came for action, boy, they start off with just such a sequence. It's just incredible. I was blown away. I was blown away by the opening sequence. And the rest of it may not have had sequences like that, but it absolutely held you with the story, with the tension, with the emotion.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a great opening sequence. You find out where Sam is and how he feels about the shield, which honestly is kind of what he told old man Steve at the end, is that he didn't feel like it fit. And I think that this entire series is him finding out how to make it fit.
Right. For those who have read recent Captain America and Falcon comics, you know that in the comics, at one point, Sam Wilson does become Captain America. And one of the fantastic things about this program is the stars of the show, meaning the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, have really well-defined arcs. You know, we like to watch Kevin Smith's podcast, Fat Man Beyond, and Mark Bernardin is always looking at shows through the lens of, do you know what the characters want? And the arcs in this are very clear. Sam Wilson does not feel like Captain America, like you said.
But I think he maybe wants to be Captain America. He wants to feel that he's worthy of the shield.
He does. And part of it is, like you said, worthy of the shield. But as the story progresses, it also becomes very clear that in his world, Captain America isn't just his personal friend, isn't just a symbol for America, but it's kind of a blonde hair, blue-eyed symbol. And he is not that. And even if it's not said at the very beginning, it is said explicitly in later episodes that Captain America means a certain thing for a lot of people. And he knows he's going to get stares if he walks around with that shield, because he is not blonde hair.
Like the comment that's made at the very end of the last episode by the bystanders. One of them says, "That's the Black Falcon." And the guy next to him says, "No, that's Captain America."
That's right.
Because he is Captain America.
He is Captain America, but he needs to... The arc is him discovering that. And you, all through the whole thing, he does one of the things that made Steve Rogers and made him Captain America, was that he always is looking out for what is right. He's always trying to be on the right side of the issue. And it doesn't matter if the government is or isn't. It doesn't matter if the people who are paying his bills are necessarily happy with his perspective on things. He will speak truth to power because he is ultimately the hero of the disenfranchised more than the hero of a political institution.
I mean, he sees what Carly and their group are trying to do.
Yes.
He wants to find a solution for them because he sees, he's like, I agree with you, but this is just not the way to do it.
Absolutely. He never views the villain. I shouldn't say that. He never views the antagonist as a villain. He views her as someone with a problem who is going about trying to solve it the wrong way. And he refuses to villainize her. Even in sort of the quote-unquote boss battle at the end, he never treats her like an enemy or a villain, ever. And that is why he is a hero. That he is ultimately about trying to help everyone. And that's why he's worthy of the shield.
Steve gets to this.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't see himself as America's puppet.
Right.
And I think Steve got to the point where he started to see himself as America's puppet and decided that he's not. He never was.
Right.
Okay, I take it back. He was America's puppet when he was on stage dancing.
Right. At the very beginning. He was truly America's puppet.
And then he found himself.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where Sam is.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I thought there was a beautiful heart-to-heart that Sam and Bucky have, where Bucky admits that when he and Steve had discussed giving Sam the shield, they saw all that stuff that we see at the end. They knew his soul. They knew his character. And they knew he was the Captain America that the world needed. But what they didn't know was the black experience. And how could they? He even says that. Bucky says those exact words. He said, we didn't think about what that would mean, and how could we? And, he apologizes for basically putting that on him before Sam himself was ready to accept not just the mantle of the shield with how with the responsibility.
They didn't realize that there was that issue because it's from the white perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is one of the beautiful things about the show as a whole, that it's not just a show about how races interact with each other, but it never shied away from the reality of it. It never tried to paper it over and say, everybody loves Sam because he's, an Avenger, and so we can just ignore the issue of race in the world. No, they dive head on into it. I mean, to the point that he is sitting at a bank with his sister who needs a loan to fix their family boat. They can't get a loan. And it doesn't matter that he's an Avenger. He's ultimately a black man with no history of employment because he was gone for 5 years because of the blip.
And it looks like he is the writer is working on the script for Captain America 4.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see that it's going to be the same writer, Malcolm Spellman, because he really seems to get the perspective that should be shared with other people.
Absolutely. So we've talked a bit about Sam's arc. This show also does such a great job with Bucky. Bucky starts out as a free man who's been pardoned by the U.S. government for his crimes, thanks to, helping save the universe. But at the same time, he's only spent his life fighting. And he doesn't know how to live. There's a great line when his psychologist says, you're free. And he looks at her and says, to do what? I mean, all he's ever done is fight.
Well, and he's still fighting, except now he's fighting himself because he's trying to move past the Winter Soldier. Right. And just be Bucky Barnes. Right. And he's got his list that he's going through of making amends, or at least, trying to make amends and for what he did as the Winter Soldier.
Right. And he doesn't even really know how to go about that. Sam spent his days after he was discharged from service as a army therapist, basically. Yeah. And he's able...
Especially, I think, with trauma.
Right. Specifically trauma. Absolutely. And he is able to help Bucky kind of get back on track. And I think they did
But even that, them getting close enough for them to really start to listen to each other. I mean, early on in the series, the therapist sits them down across from each other and they're supposed to talk to each other. And they're like staring at each other.
Right.
And it's this awkward where now if they did that, I think that there'd be a lot less tension.
Yeah. Part of Bucky's arc is also shown in his interaction with Sam's family and community. He shows up in a mid-episode with a suit that the Wakandans created for Sam, and he shows up at the docks while they're fixing their boat. And he sort of walks up, and nobody knows who he is, and he doesn't really want to interact with anybody. He does, flirt a little bit with Sam's sister, but he's more or less keeping to himself. And he wants to be part of what's going on, but he's just so kind of retreated into his own self. But at the very end, he goes to like a neighborhood barbecue at the docks. Everybody knows him. He's welcomed as a friend. He plays with the kids. I mean, he is now the person that he is now, like you said, he is finally Bucky Barnes. Mm-hmm. He's not the recovering Winter Soldier. He is Bucky Barnes, and he can interact with people as Bucky. And I love how both heroes of the show get a great arc. And if we're talking about characters that get a great arc, I think that Zemo, Daniel Bruhl, was one of the better Marvel movie antagonists, and he really got to shine in this series.
He's just wonderful. I mean, and Marvel had a lot of fun with him too, because for a while, and you may have seen this, even if you haven't seen the series, you might have seen on like Twitter people asking about Zemo dancing, and Marvel like put up a whole bunch of different, it ended up being like an hour long of different takes of just him dancing. He just has this very calm, regal demeanor about him.
In the series, he's only they have to go to a town, a kind of a shady town to meet shady people to get information, and so Baron Zemo is just trying to fit in with these ne'er-do-wells that he knew, so he kind of just dances a little bit in this club. I think there's like 15 seconds of dancing or something in the episode. But it's actually a wonderful moment because you see that, number one, he's just pretty awkward. I mean, he's been in prison, hasn't gone out dancing.
I don't necessarily think that it's that he's awkward. He's just like, it doesn't faze him.
Well, that's the thing. He's living his best life. I mean, he doesn't care what he looks like. He's free. He's out of prison. All this time in a sense is a bonus from the mission that drove him to be in prison. And Daniel Bruhl is just loving every second. It's perfectly appropriate for Zemo. And in the comics, Zemo is a villain, but he's not pure darkness. And I think that this series did a wonderful job of portraying a Zemo who has his obsessive goal, and that is there can be no super soldiers. That as long as there's super soldiers, there is too much risk to the non-super society, and that they all must be eliminated. And yet, because the heroes are looking for super soldiers as well, this makes him happy to work with them when it suits him. But at the same time, they all change each other. And it's great. They open Zemo's mind to maybe not all super soldiers. Zemo opens their mind to maybe what he wants isn't so bad. And maybe people need to solve their own problems and not just rely on messiah figures and icons and things like that. And I thought, again, it was just handled so well. The writing, the acting, everything. It was incredibly watchable.
You get about halfway through the series to the episode The Whole World is Watching. Mm-hmm. And you have this blonde hair, blue-eyed, white guy that's taken up the shield, who is the opposite of what Steve was. He's the soldier
And
instead
that's
of a good guy.
Right.
The Dora Milaje shows up. They want Zemo because he needs to answer his crimes.
Right. He killed their king.
And this new Captain America, there's a great quote that Io says, the Dora Milaje has jurisdiction wherever the Dora Milaje find themselves to be. They just take it with them. And there's this fight, and there's this great fight that between them and the new Captain America.
Right.
And Bucky and Sam are just watching, and Sam's like, well, should we help him? Or, we should do something.
Right.
And Bucky's like, you got it.
Yeah, says, you're doing great, John.
You're doing great, John.
Because they don't want to fight the Dora Milaje, and the Dora Milaje doesn't want to fight them. They still need Baron Zemo to help them, but at the same time, they don't want to fight the Dora Milaje because they also agree that he needs to face justice, that they sort of borrowed him for a while for their mission, but he's still going to jail. They very half-heartedly just try and intervene a little bit, but they're clearly not putting their soul into it. They're not hurting the Dora Milaje, and the Dora Milaje is careful not to hurt them as well. They just know that this is how they feel. They get them. The Dora Milaje gets Sam and Bucky out of their way because they want to achieve their mission, but they don't hurt them, although they really hurt Bucky's pride by using the remove arm code that Bucky didn't know existed, which made him feel bad.
Yeah, the look on Sebastian Stan's face, he did such a good job there, because the look on his face is like, what the heck just happened?
Yeah. Yeah. This is just another like excellent moment. And talk about payoffs. I mentioned this to Golden, though I guess she understood it more than I did, but in the finale, in the 6th episode, or no, this may have been this was in the 5th episode. There's a moment where Baron Zemo is simply mourning the loss of his family, as he was in the movie Captain America: Civil War, and he's at the big monument for Sokovia. When Bucky comes up to him, and he turns to Bucky, and he says, "I've decided that I'm not going to kill you." And Bucky blows it off. He says, "That's very good of you," because he's there to arrest Baron Zemo and thinks, he's just trying to act tough and, pretend he's on top of the situation when really, he's there and the Dora Milaje is there and Zemo is not in control of the situation. But in the finale, it's paid off. In fact, no, he had with his butler, he had put in motion the plan to blow up and murder all of the remaining super soldiers. And he was telling Bucky on the level that he is not being targeted. But of course, that wasn't apparent until episode 6, where you saw all the rest of the super soldiers blowing up and the Baron Zemo's butler looking very pleased with himself. So I thought that was another example of how everything introduced, no matter how small, is paid off in the end. And also just, acted really well, great writing, just everything.
See, I didn't feel like the boat situation and Sam going home was a filler episode.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they just didn't have any information to act on. They're waiting for the information. So instead of sitting there twiddling their thumbs, they're going to do something productive.
Right. Sam has a family. That is something Sam has over Steve Rogers, that one of the reasons Steve Rogers was sort of as haunted as he was, and ultimately why in Endgame he decided, well, I've done my job, now I'm going to go to create an alternate reality with Peggy, is because he had no family. He had nothing left. But Sam does.
There is an end credit in the very last episode, by the way, if you need to go back and catch that. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'll let you do that. The characters are just so rich. There isn't one character that you're really introduced to that is main or, secondary that you couldn't tell a lot about that character.
I would agree with that, but I would say
with the exception of one.
I would say that of all the characters that were there, I don't want to say disappointed, that's too strong, but I don't feel that the arc they gave Sharon Carter, and I'm admittedly I'm saying this because I've read Sharon Carter in the comics. And I don't really think that they necessarily gave her an arc that represents that character. They basically decided to make her a double-dealing villain type character, who the heroes think is on their side and the villains think is on their side. And I don't think that needed to be her. I think it could have been a new character or someone else. I don't know. The Sharon Carter from the comics that I guess I have in my head is like Steve and like her aunt, someone who is uncorruptible.
I agree with you there. Yeah. I mean, the United States has not treated her very well.
Right.
But still, I mean, I would think that if she grew up around them, that she might be similar to them. I was talking about characters being more three-dimensional, though.
Mm-hmm.
Know.
Right, sure.
The only character that we really didn't know very much about was Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character.
Right, very mysterious. But, she herself is just such a spectacular actress that even with a few lines and 2 scenes, she can command a room. It was just fun to see her in the role, even though we don't know who it is. I mean, well, if you've read the comics, you know who the character is. But I mean, in the series, they don't necessarily make it clear who this woman is. But for those of us who do know who the character is, having it played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, it is just wonderful icing on the cake. I really hope, in the comics, her character is very close to Nick Fury. I really would love to see Sam Jackson and Julia Louis-Dreyfus on camera.
Sharing a scene?
Yeah. That would be wonderful. And I bet not just, assuming the writers do a good job of setting it all up, I bet those actors could just own those moments and just make them amazing. That would be fantastic. Yeah, the only characters that aren't really fleshed out are like really, really side characters. Like Sam has a friend in the military who's just a soldier, and we see him sporadically show up, and he's not the deepest character. We don't learn anything about his private life or anything like that, but he's really just there to be a sounding board for Sam, and the actor does a wonderful job of just being in the moment in those scenes he's supposed to be. So that's not a criticism. It's just like, not every character in a thing like this gets to be featured. Although, speaking of features, we should mention young Kurt Russell. Daddy was in a Marvel movie, and now Wyatt Russell got to be in a Marvel series, and Wyatt Russell played John Walker, that I believe is the character's name, who starts out as the government-approved new Captain America and ends up as U.S. agent. I thought Wyatt Russell did a wonderful job of creating a character who is absolutely not up to the mantle of Captain America. He is so not up to the mantle.
I mean,
it's tragic.
He might have the medals, he might have the soldier of him, but I don't think the people that chose him as Captain America really understood Steve.
Right.
And why Steve was chosen.
Right. And what Wyatt did so well is he played a guy that for so much of the series was a thorn in the hero's side because he was carrying the shield. He was not up for the shield, and he was clearly just a tool, but he wasn't a bad guy. He was just a guy who was way out of his depth and doing what he thought he was supposed to do, when in fact what he should have been doing is, number one, just been a more compassionate person, but number two, been using his brain and looking at every side of the issue, like Sam and Bucky were doing. in the end, you do see he wants to do good, that he's not just a tool. He has a choice at the end. Do I get the revenge that I'm craving, or do I save people who are in jeopardy? And you can see him literally like shake off the effects of the serum, which is trying to just make him want to just be more of what he is. And he's saying, no, this is the morally right thing to do. And instead he tries to save people. So he's not a bad person, but he was put out of his depth, and it made him make terrible decisions. And I think Wyatt played that very well.
Yeah, and apparently, if you look at like the trivia on IMDb, that was his first audition ever. Was for Captain America, the First Avenger. So that was kind of. And there's another interesting trivia on IMDb that I thought you'd find interesting. That remember you're talking about Sam's contact in the Air Force, Lieutenant Torres. Apparently, he's based on the comic book character Joaquin Torres, who is the second person to take on the mantle of Falcon.
Oh, very nice. It was almost set up a little bit because
he leaves his wings there.
Right. When Sam is so just sort of despondent that Carly got away, that John Walker's sidekick Battlestar was killed, and Walker kind of went insane, and his wings were broken in his getting back the shield. He just, Torres has the wings and says, "What do you want to do with these?" He just kind of despondently says, "Keep them," because he's thinking, where do we go from here? It's just done. But yeah, that does kind of set up Torres to be to fix them, because we've seen those two working on his gear before. So that does set up Torres.
Yes.
In a beautiful way.
Yeah, and like we said, the Flag Smashers. The Flag Smashers are basically referred to as a terrorist group, and not that they're not creating terror, but it's a label, and Sam addresses that in his speech at the end. Right.
One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
Yeah.
And I think that this show did a really good job of showing that people with legitimate problems can resort to the wrong methods, but for the right reasons. And that's what this was about. And they, like you said, that last speech that Sam gives, which I think, again, talk about just the writing being great. He's talking to the people in power. He's talking to senators. He's talking to people in this global council. And all the cameras are on him. He's talking to these people. He's not talking to the cameras. But everybody hears what Sam says. Everybody. It's all over. And everyone at that moment knows what the new Captain America stands for.
Exactly.
And that is the moment that in episode 5, when we're watching Sam train to basically do aerial gymnastics with the shield, that may have been when he became Captain America to himself. But that speech at the end was where he became Captain America to the world.
Yes.
And it was done so well. So well. And of course, you can tell just the camaraderie that Bucky and Sam have at that point. We, the audience, see Bucky watching almost reverently.
They've grown closer, but he didn't really hear it because he was texting.
Right, we see that he's watching almost reverently to everything Sam is saying, and then when Sam goes to meet him, he says, "Yeah, I after you talked about wearing the stars and stripes, I was texting. I didn't hear anything you said." And of course, he's smiling, and then tells him what he really thought. But the rapport between those two is great. And speaking of trivia, I remember reading somewhere that one of the reasons they decided to pair those two is that on the press tour, they just saw that Sebastian Stan and Anthony Mackie had such a fantastic personal relationship with each other. And that helped get the juices flowing to, hey, wouldn't it be a fantastic show to put these two people together? And it was a fantastic show. So yeah, like I'd said in the spoiler free part, if you like Marvel, you will love this show. If you like genre, you will like this show. If you like political thrillers, you will like this show. And if you fit any of those if you don't fit any of those categories, I'm not quite sure why you're listening to a podcast called The Omega Beam. But if you fit any of those categories, you probably should be subscribing to Disney Plus. I mean, it's just got so much good stuff. And I'm not, they're not paying us to say this, but but
we wouldn't be opposed to them paying us to say that.
We would not be. Disney Plus, call us. But yeah, we just watch so much good stuff on Disney Plus. I mean, as an aside,
not all of it science fiction and fantasy.
I was going to say, as an aside, we're watching some documentaries that were on the National Geographic's channel that are just fantastic. Watching one about, Scandinavia right now, which is just amazing. But yeah, I mean, it is a lot of value for what they're charging. But back to the Marvel stuff, being able to have all the Marvel stuff, and in fact, truly all the Marvel stuff, because they just inked the deal with Sony that the Marvel Universe Sony movies, the Spider-Man movies, which are not currently on Disney Plus, will be coming to Disney Plus. So it literally will be all of it. And if you like this show, like Golden said, you don't need to watch any of the movies to get this series. But if you see them and it inspires you to want to go back, they're all there. Every single movie that the Falcon or the Winter Soldier is in is on Disney Plus. That is a lot of hours. Yeah, I could not be more happy with how this series turned out. And every single week, it was always an exciting moment to start a new episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. There was never, like with some series, especially long-running series, where maybe this season isn't as great as the last season. You're like, okay, well, I'm watching it because I'm a completist and I want to know what happens. But, it's almost more, at this point, rote. But not with this show. Every single time there was a new episode, I was excited to watch it. Well, thank you, Golden.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/123. If you like this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It's those reviews that help people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any questions or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. Full stop.